Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for another PB&J card class. And this is another nautical themed paint with me stamping session. And so here is a look at the card that we will be creating today. If you are in the mood to get out your paints and your stamps and just have a lot of fun painting a relaxing scene, then this is the stamp set for you. The stamp set I'm using is from our new Dream and Discover collection, and it is called 30-844 at ease. And just before we begin, I want to mention that all the supplies I'm using, including the colors, the stamps, paper, everything, will be listed on screen at the very end of the video. So if you want to see those in more detail, you can just hit pause and check them out at that time. So to begin, I have pre-stamped my image using oh my goodness, can't talk. Memento Desert Sand ink onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. For a few of these black areas on the image, I'm so sorry I'm off screen here a little bit, I am using a Pitt Artist pen in black just to outline those before I begin. This pen is waterproof, so I don't need to worry about the color, the black bleeding out when I paint over the top of it. And I promise I am secretly, now not so secretly, adding this black, just tracing over the lines that I've stamped. You could also wait and do this at the very end, but for some reason I just was in the mood to do it first. So I have done that. I love the whimsy of this stamped image. Now for my painting, I am just using Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors. So I just have a cheap palette here that I picked up, I think at Target it was, and I fill that up with the colors that I'm using to paint this in. So I will have all of those colors listed for you at the very end of the video so you know exactly what was in my palette as I was painting this. And I'm beginning just by getting some of this sort of sand area down here. I had some on my, I don't know how I managed to get ink everywhere on me when I am painting, but I'm just cleaning off my thumb there. I have a whole bunch of brown ink that I got on there somehow, so that's what I was doing. Are you like that? Do you find your hands magically get ink all over them when you are painting? If so, you'll have to let me know in the comments down below. I'm usually have quite the hands after I'm doing something that really shouldn't have my hands so messy, but it's the way it goes. Anyways, I added some antique linen distress ink re-inker first, and then I'm going in with, I have to look at the supply list, but with just a little bit of more of a yellow tone on top of that. I'm trying not to be too perfect in applying this. I want areas of light, areas of dark, even some areas of white, that to give the look of sand. I'm also going to add, while that's still wet, a little bit of a shadow here with the brown. You can see it's still wet because that color does sort of blend and move around when I put it in there. That also buys me some time to go in and blend it out. Or if I put that right onto a perfectly dry area, I would definitely want to just work small sections at a time, where here I could do some larger areas and then go back and blend it with water. Now you'll see up on the top right hand corner of the screen a little bit of a napkin peeking out there. I have my water for rinsing my brush and a napkin there, and I often, almost always after I rinse my brush with water, will pat it onto that napkin to remove the excess water, and that just gives me a little bit more control as I am painting. Now I went ahead and dried that bottom section, and I am going to move on now to painting on our water. So I knew I was going to do some red on the main part of this image, the stamped part, and so I'm doing my backgrounds and all things that are not red first because red is a color that really likes to blend out if it gets re-wet after you paint it. So if you know what color you're going to do something in your foreground, you may want to wait and do that last and paint your background first. I don't always know that when I start a card, but in this instance I sort of had a plan as I went into it. Now, I have never painted a C type background before, so I just tried to do this in the most simplest way possible and share that with you. That's one thing I love about paint or about stamping and making cards. Things don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have studied um, how to paint things specifically. You can just really go with colors you like, what makes you happy, and put that paint on and just keep having fun. It's a card also, so it doesn't need to be perfect. It's supposed to look homemade, and also this image is a very whimsical image. So I think that that also helps, that if your shading or your coloring is not perfectly realistic, that's okay, because the image is also meant to look whimsical, to look fun, to not be perfectly realistic. Now up in the sky here, I dropped a few colors. Now on this palette over here, I'm adding some Arteza gouache paint right out of the tube, and I like to use some of it right out of the tube because it's a very opaque, and I get like a nice sort of dry brush look to it when I apply it with my paintbrush that is pretty dry. And I'm just adding some waves here as they come into the beachy area. Now, if you want to blend it out, like I was like, oh, that is not what I was going for, you can add some water before it dries and even some after it's dry and blend it out. And it does create like a very smooth, I loved how this made the other blues look on that ocean area when I blended the gouache paint into it. And then I'm going to go in and add some more. And I will play around with this a bit until I'm happy with it. Definitely just learning as I go as I paint this in. And then I will dry this before moving on to my next step. And I will be moving over here to our stamped image. So at this point I was feeling like not completely happy with my background, and especially the sky and the sea area, but I thought I think I need to step away from that for a little bit, and so I moved on to another part of the image. So sometimes if you're painting something and it's okay, but it's not quite how you wanted it, just step away, do something else, do a different card or do a different section on the card, and then things may evolve and bring you back to liking the background more or thinking of a way to fix it. Here I'm just adding a little bit to this trim work. It is so fun to paint these stamps from the At Ease stamp set because these images you can do like any colors that you want. You could go with like a real muted ocean look, like lots of whites and just really basic. Or you can go super bright. You could do all different colors of stripes. If you Google this, you'll get lots of ideas too for color schemes. You could stamp also, if you wanted to have more to paint, you could stamp like a row of these on your card. You could turn your card to more of a landscape orientation and fit more all in a row across. There's just tons of ways to use these, and really great for any occasion. Summertime relaxation, a retirement, a vacation card, masculine card, or you just want to paint something summery and it's the middle of winter. These are great stamps for that. Our entire Dream and Discover collection is really great for that, for just some pick-me-up and unique images to paint. Now here's where I felt like that gray was just not enough contrast with the sky and the water around it. So I went in and added that brown, which I really liked much, much more. And I'm just putting a little bit of that color down, and then before it dries, blending it with water. That just gives it a very light effect. Continuing to move around my image, and when possible or when I plan it enough, I try to do the red last. Now here I ended up painting the sails on this boat yellow, and looking back, there's one thing I would definitely change about this card. I painted them this reddish yellow tone, and once I was done, I felt like that really blended into the rest of the image. So if I could go back and do this card again, I would, which I definitely could, I would do those sails in a blue to match the sky, just to pull that down into the foreground a little bit more. So hindsight is 2020. So I'm going to keep painting here, keeping things bright, keeping it just happy and fun, not doing any sort of particular shading or worrying about a light source in any way, just putting down the colors that I like that make me happy. And that is another good thing about this particular image. The whimsical style of it really lends itself to just coloring things in, whether you're using markers or paints or whatever you like, colored pencils. You don't have to do a lot of fancy shading. You can just color it in and it looks great. Doing a little bit of thinking here about what colors go where. And here I'm using an Arteza Twi marker, and I just feel like I have a little bit more control with this than I do with the paint. So for real small areas, I love to grab these markers. They're a water-based marker, so if you find you want to blend it out with water, you can. But I just grab them here to add a little bit of dark detail and sort of the fine detail like around the door and the window panes that I could easily do. I could definitely paint it in, but I just find that my hand is more steady with the marker than it is with the paintbrush sometimes. And then of course I smudged things. So I'm getting just some water on my paintbrush and painting on top of that and then dabbing it up. But at this point I was not going to stop or check this and throw it away. Now here is where I felt like things started to come together and I loved it so much more. I went ahead and darkened up the water here, especially up near the horizon, and I loved how that looked with the red on the stamped image. And this is where, in looking back, I wish I had painted that little sailboat blue. But I can always do another card, right? And I'm just working with adding a little shading in here on these waves coming in. And just to smooth out this sky area a little bit, I decided to use some Memento ink and an ink dauber, a sponge ink dauber. This is the jumbo size from Sukaneko. You could also just use like an ink blending tool with a foam pad and nautical Memento ink up at the top around the edges. And I felt like that just finished things off and tied it into the color of the water too. So here's the finished card. I stamped the sentiment. It's from that same stamp set. Again, this was such fun to paint. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, as well as Instagram and our website and blog. And I will link to all of those for you, as well as the stamp set used today down in the YouTube description box below. And here is a list of all the supplies used in creating this card. Happy stamping!